Okay, I've been told to look at Pageau's covering of the Olympics thing, so I'm gonna do it without punching a wall. By speaking in a variety of accents, I guess. this is this is how I don't get mad. No, is that? I feel like the camera angle's weird. I have to have it on because I just have like a bunch of random thoughts. I really feel like it's weird. Oh, it's fine. A bunch of random thoughts, and they will not be in order because, yeah. Oh, I just turned it on because I was thinking, because I came to the part where he said there's nothing wrong with diversity, but society doesn't accept diversity. Only through carnival can we accept diversity. Well, I don't know anything about how societies function. I don't know so much. I haven't had experience even in a family, even in a big community. So I can really not speak too much about the larger like structures, but I do know, I understand what he's saying from an abstract perspective. Obviously I don't agree with the conclusion that he's drawing from that. I feel like there is also, I feel like there is also a movement of widening circle of what is normal, or what is able to exist in within, or exist, like, right, like allowing other races in America to be equal and to vote, and allowing women to vote and stuff, but maybe he thinks that's bad too. Like, at a certain point you can take it like ad absurdum and say, like, I feel like what am I saying? There was a bunch of other stuff before where I was just like, okay. To be honest, he said at the beginning that for him this is a boring subject, and this is just like, it's so obvious. And for me also, this which is his perspective on it so far, I'm only at the beginning, but so far it's checking all the boxes. It's also boring to me. It's like, okay, a person who is kind of has a perspective that is maybe halfway up the mountain, so to speak, or maybe halfway down, in the sense of not really fully, I don't know, halfway. This person is checking the usual points, making fun of COVID, making fun of or having low-key negative language toward LGBTQ people, all the rest, saying, oh, Christians are being gaslit by the culture, this is the movement of the culture in the last 5 to 20 years. I'm like, yes, this is also boring to me. Like, I know this. But when he says about the carnival, wait, hold up, I'm gonna read on. Right, because I was reading about this. I was reading a book by a person that I personally like his perspective more than Pageau's perspective, Georges Bataille, and he wrote, I was reading Eroticism, Death, and Sensuality by him. I'm like almost through it, and he talks exactly about this. He talks about the way that humans have come out from the violence, the flow and the violence of life and death and the cycles. I talked about this in the last video of the bushes of love, and then have made a society where you push all that out, and then you have to occasionally give in to the violence and come back out of it, and there's this movement, right? I think that he and I do define violence. First of all, I think that, because when I was reading Bataille, I wasn't very, like, this, it bothers me, it gets to me in a way that reading Bataille doesn't get to me so much. And I'm trying to figure out why that is, because they're basically saying the same principle, I think. Yeah, they're saying the same principle, but the way that he says it or the way that he applies it, I'm like, it's hard for me to read, but I'm trying to say why. And maybe part of it is because he defines this violence, this thing outside of culture, differently than I do, maybe. Like, for instance, I imagine that for him, maybe, well, I don't know, but I imagine, it seems like he's equating, say, the queer people he's equating them with the margins and them with the outside. Maybe Bataille probably did too, being living when he lived, but he didn't bring it up a lot. But like he would equate that, I guess, to being inherently violent or inherently like outside of what can exist peacefully in a culture. But I don't think that that's true, or in my experiences it isn't true. You know, in my experience of just living every day, people who are polyamorous, people who are gay or whatever, they will have families and kids and go to work and have friends and stuff the same way as anybody else. And kind of, it can be so to speak, in the square of what's in society. Like, it doesn't have to tear apart the fabric of society, but I guess for him it does inherently. But I think that, I don't know, also a lot of things can exist within heterosexual traditional families that also tears apart society. I don't think I'm expressing this well. But I just wanted to say that because he said that, and I was like, well, Georges Bataille, I've just been reading about this, and the movement in and out, and the movement of the order, and the violence and the chaos. But also, Georges Bataille talks about how Christianity makes a change in this. Christianity, everything changed because what you had in the pagan world was this thing of, you have the sacred and the taboo are kind of the same, and there is a realm. There are the four realms. There's the realm of like profane good and profane evil, or something like that. Like, don't steal from your neighbor. Stealing from your neighbor on a random day, that's profane evil. And good would be, you know, being nice to the person you're buying your groceries from, and don't cheat, don't steal or something. Yeah. And then there's a sacred realm, which is the same as the realm of taboo and the realm of like violence, and this realm that breaks out of the ordinary. And it's the sacred realm, and it is not subject to the same morality as the other realms. So you could have in this space, you have wars, you have cruelty, orgies, all this stuff that is violence in a very broad sense, how Bataille uses it in a very broad sense. You have that violence, and it is a different realm. Like, and we can't, my mind at least can't really comprehend what he means by that, looking at things like that, because what Christianity did was kind of flatten it out and say, no, God, the sacred, is good, is love. There is not this violence. We want everything to be good, everything to be love. But what that kind of did was exile the things that there used to be a space for in exceptions and in spaces. It kind of exiled that. So there's this tension and this kind of coming to terms with that and like grappling with that. And I wonder if maybe in a post-Christian world, or in a Christian or post-Christian world, after that kind of movement has been made, which then says, okay, no, we're gonna kind of, the good, God is good, and that everything can be good and everything can be love, without having to say that, without that good can like triumph over, it's hard to describe. But after that movement, maybe even the way that we deal with this cycle of carnival and the inn and the margins, maybe that changes too, because that kind of morality changed the way that people negotiate with the divine, the way that people negotiate with violence and eroticism and sin and profanation. Profaning the divine becomes the new kind of like taboo and stuff like that. Basically, yeah. I wonder if that's changed. But I'm gonna keep reading because, yeah, I'm gonna keep reading. Pause. Like the way that I saw it reading Bataille, Christianity, and I would, maybe Islam too, because Islam is like in that same Abrahamic religion. I don't know, but he was talking about Christianity, so but Christianity, like, it started, especially the hegemonic version of it that like took over and everything and was killing everyone. and trying to convert everyone in eternal conscious torment, especially that version. But Christianity exiled a lot of things and said these things, they don't take part in the divine. You know, the stuff that used to be taboo and sacred at the same time, and now there's like, no. Like, for instance, prostitution used to have a role as the sacred, as a sacred taboo type of thing, and now after Christianity, it became just, no, you're the filth, you're the scum of the streets if you do that, kind of thing. So it exiled, but then I think, as I see it, the next step after that, Christianity, or that type of morality or framing of the divine, it exiles more, but it also allows for more inclusion, or for more, like, the whole world maybe can be caught up in the good and caught up in love and harmony. At least this is the way that I see things personally. In my view, I am kind of an idealist as far as I can make forays into the realm of like violence and the things being a mixed bag and just pain and all of that. I can make forays into that realm, but I do tend to come back to think that the good with the capital G and everything, and harmony and love, covers all of that and is inclusive over it. And maybe that's something that in the previous realm, where you have this complete separation, or no, in the pagan realm, what he was saying, maybe that would be impossible to have this complete inclusion, just like it would be impossible to have a complete exclusion. So yeah, like, maybe, because for me, he seems to be equating. He says you can't celebrate diversity in a society. Society doesn't, because it's this ordered thing that's about more conformity, I guess. To be able to, stick together, you do have to give up part of yourself to fit into the public space. But maybe, especially after Christianity did what it did to the pagan system of the profane and the sacred, and of the good and the bad, maybe especially after that, maybe it is now possible to have a society that can include more. I think that it's possible to have such a society regardless of what people say with their words about it, but like, maybe I'm trying to make it fit into the symbolic thing that he's setting up here. But, oh my god, I was gonna say something. Yeah, like, oh yeah, include more. And that's not to say that the rhythm still doesn't exist of like a fast and a feast day, or like of the upright world, and then occasional spaces and times where that's turned upside down. Like, that always exists, but maybe in a different form. But I'm not saying that's obviously still a thing in some way. But for me, it's not, I don't understand the thing that he's saying of having fat lesbian DJs in this. It's not bothering me. I'm like, why are you acting? He's throwing shade at it like it's like destroying society, but I think that's not. And I think there's probably a way to even express that in the symbolic language that he's using. Like, okay, in the Christian, because what he's describing is that this scene from the Olympics is a type of inversion, is a type of feast day, is a type of this. But, as Bataille points out, after Christianity, those things no longer have the meaning that they used to have. It has changed. Everything has changed. And the meaning of such feast, it has changed. Like, I think it gained a sort of moral polarity that it didn't used to have before. Something like that. And yeah, there maybe one way to put it is that in this world there is no longer societally that kind of space that there used to be in the pagan feasts and the orgies and whatever, where morality was suspended in the way that it was, or yeah, we don't treat that the same now. So he's kind of acting like, to me, he seems to be kind of acting like everything is still the way that it was back when the source material for this, the feast and the Greek gods and everything existed, but it's not. Like Christianity and things, they've made a complete difference. And so what he seems to be saying to me is that, oh, look at this, they are taking this celebration of the margins, this inversion, this topsy-turvy world, and placing it in the center, just as if a Greek or a pagan society would take their feast day and put it in the center. Not that they weren't like stabbing each other, and that this is a complete sidetrack, but they did stab each other in the Senate. I feel like that also, I don't know where I'm going with that. But yeah, but I think that no, that's something different. It has to have a different meaning now. It's not the same. And I haven't fully understood what Bataille is saying with that, but the basic idea is it changes the morality in the around these things and stuff. Anyway, I will keep reading now. I'm sorry, I just can't get over this, what he said, societies don't celebrate diversity. And I can't articulate maybe exactly how that hits me. Like, because I understand the concept, what he's saying. It makes sense in theory, but maybe in practice I'm not. Because Jesus, wasn't he a figure that was celebrating exactly the offscouring of everything else? And isn't Christianity supposed to be a culture that is expanding from what Jesus did? Like, Jesus was the ultimate marginal figure, and he was hanging out with all the other marginal figures. He was a marginal figure, and indeed a figure of complete, just destruction. Like, to me, for instance, something like a lesbian couple, they aren't against the family because they can also have their kids and their job and they can be in society. A criminal and a person who is completely against the religion of the time, that is definitely a figure of destruction. And Jesus, when he died, he was what? A criminal in the eyes of the government and a blasphemer in the eyes of the dominant religion. He was not fitting into society. And Christianity, isn't it meant to be kind of a continuation of what he put forward? How has Pageau's view on these things not changed at all, given the figure of Jesus? I'm not saying how specifically they should change or could change, but it seems like they should change somewhat. Societies do not celebrate diversity. I don't know, because you belong to the religion of the person who took all the stuff from the margins and he said, oh, this is God. That's something. That's some kind of movement. And I say again, he is now going into all of the different ways in which this display kind of, on the surface, it is a display of this chaos and everything. And in the modern society, I guess that is the new thing. But what if it was in the years before when racial equality was worse, and what if it had Black people or people of different races performing? I could see someone using his exact rhetoric that he's using here with, look at the rainbow flag, look at the ambiguity of the drag queen where you can't tell the gender and it's mixed up and everything, taking these surface symbols, these visual, the stuff that hits you right away if you're not used to this, and saying, whoa, that shows that it's disruptive to the society. Because if you are used to the society being comprised of white men, and then you have a Black man up there, or a Black woman even, or just a woman, and those are things I think that maybe most people would not care about that now. I guess there's still people who complain about that, but not as much as this, I think. Never mind, people are still complaining about this, but I feel like not in the same way, maybe. And maybe if he wouldn't maybe point that out, I don't think he would say, oh, everyone in there should be white. Yeah. But I think I've lost my point. But he's pointing of these very true things, rainbow is a multiplicity of colors, and a drag queen is someone who is gender ambiguous and playing with gender. These are true things. But the way that they're... Yeah. The best way to enact systemic change is through joy and carnival. Okay, yeah, but isn't that like... Going back to my previous point, other than the point about previous changes in society, without destroying society, but changing in it, the previous changes in society also, look very scandalous, especially at first. And that's what jumps out at you. And you can make a narrative that those things are inherently scandalous, maybe, or that they're forced, or that everything. Like, a lot of this stuff is the same as was used with race and with women being included in more of society. But I think that he maybe still thinks that women shouldn't be. So I'm not even sure I can make this argument with him. But yeah, I don't know. It's the same rhetoric, so I'm a little bit suspicious of that. You can make a lot of narratives out of one thing. You can make so many different narratives out of a set of symbols and a set of phenomena. And he is choosing one. And you can't deny the fact of what he's putting, but I think the way he's putting it together, it rubs me the wrong way. But I say, oh, okay. I'm sorry, I can't. This is... I don't like it. But I'm really bored today, so I'm just gonna do this instead of, just staring at my screen. So yeah, he said, but this, going back to the original thing about Jesus, or the thing about Jesus, it says he does his sermons in drag. He says the best way to enact systemic change is through joy and carnival. This is not a problem. So was Jesus not a figure of that kind of disruption? Was he not? Was that not exactly what he is? Because that's how I think of, his role was to disrupt everything, and maybe in a joyful way, and maybe in, even an angry way, which we're not even getting into here. This is not even angry protest or anything. This is just the joy, side of things. Yeah. Yeah, see, the thing is for me that having read Georges Bataille, what he sounds like he's doing is staying in. He's conflating. He's conflating as if you could still use the same stuff about margins and center and sacred and profane, or not sacred and profane. Sacred and profane, as if it was still the pre-Christian world, when it's not now. But he's still using that same, when people on the margins are handed a little bit of power, and when they hold on to that power for longer than intended, things happen. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I will try to get through this. Okay, he's actually, the more that I read, I'm like, fuck yeah, I love this. I love what they have done with the drag Last Supper or whatever. I'm like, this is amazing. And to me, this actually shows the tenets of Christianity so beautifully. I find that way about a lot of queer, art. And there's queer Christian art that's, intentionally devotional. This was not intentionally devotional, I assume. But I'm like, hey, yeah, it kind of is now. This is an icon to me now. Because he's saying, this image of the supper, the communion, this has been a guiding thing, a foundational thing for the West. It brings multiplicity into one. Well, I like that he says it brings multiplicity into one, but then he's also saying that these people on the margins cannot have power, cannot be equal with, or cannot be on a status with. Because, why? It's a very centralized... Anyway, no, I'm getting off my point, because he was saying, it's an image of the cohesion of the West for the past 2,000 years, yes. The way in which the West brings multiplicity into one, yeah. The center for the West, yes. And the best way to undo that, in order to bring about a new identity, is to undo communion, and to mock, and I would say to play with, the things that are sacred. And he is saying that it's bad. He's saying that like it's a bad thing. Because what I see, and how I would put that is to say that the image that has become the main image, and I wouldn't even say the traditional image, because as I understand, the older traditions were a lot more inclusive. For instance, they would have image of Christ as feminine, side wound summer, if you know, you know, of side wound summer, and they would have image of Christ as feminine. Women had some more like, I don't know, I feel like there was, well, obviously there were a lot of women in the Gospels. Anyway, that then kind of became crowded out by the hegemony, by the power. So I'm not even going to say the traditional image, but the typical, the main, the hegemonic, I don't even know if I'm saying that right, image of this Last Supper, right? It is something that's it needs, sometimes things need to be broken apart. I don't know, there are cracks in everything. That's how the light gets in. Like, it is a realizing that this image, or this box, I mean, for Christians who consider Christianity to come from Judaism, or to the looking at it like that, which I don't, because Judaism is its own thing, but also like Christianity did grow out of it. So looking at it from that perspective, in which Christianity improves on Judaism, you would say that was this little box that only this one nation could fit in. Then, because you could literally say all this shit about what Jesus originally did. So then there was this one box where only the Jewish nation would fit, and everyone else was lesser citizens on the margins. And if you would just bring them all in and make them equal, you would destroy the unity. So then this new thing comes along, takes those symbols of that religion and that God and everything in the sacred text, the prophecies, recontextualizes them, breaks them open, and of course it is a new religion in the end that's founded, but like breaks them open and creates a new unity through a time of kind of chaos and dissolution and everything, in order to include more people, not just as a feast day thing where all are welcome, but as a solid new thing that can hold more people because it is stronger. Again, that's not actually how I look at Judaism and Christianity, because I know that Judaism is its own thing, but from that perspective in which of Christianity is a flowering out, which is what he believes, I would say, then yeah, that's exactly what it did. It took this one image of maybe, God, Hashem, and Israel, and the chosen people, and all these images, and then recontextualized them, broke them open, played with them, moved them around. And if you were if you were attached to the stuff from the past, you would look at this and be like, what are you doing? You're destroying everything. And then it has come together and cohesively into a new square, a new center that, with new margins, a new center that can include more people. And that's and like that's a lot of what I see in the, what you want to call, deconstruction movement or whatever happening in that movement. What I see and the way that I've experienced it primarily is that image of the Last Supper with the bunch of white men who are partaking in the supper, that image is good, it is what it is. But more and more, as we go on, there are a lot of people who are part of our daily lives who don't fit into that image, other than by cutting off really important parts of themselves. And especially don't fit into that image as it is like interpreted by the majority of the people. And so now what we have done is to break that image apart a little bit and play with it a little bit, and even in a holy fool, and in a kind of way I would say to mock it a little bit, and because humor and it plays with things, it opens up what's deep, what's below it, and yeah, exactly what he's describing of, what did he say, to undo communion, and I would say to redo communion, because there is, I don't know, you can't say that they're not having communion. You can say you don't want in, but the queer Christian community is a thing, the world overall, yeah, but yeah, I would say, he's kind of stopped at a certain point where he's like, these people who are, and again, I'm treating this as if it's making a serious commentary on Christianity, because some do. For instance, that image of Jesus with the wounds, with the transgender, like the top scars, where the people are touching his top surgery scars as if, they were touching his wounds. That's a serious piece of queer art, right? That's not a mockery, but people who would look at it would say that's a mockery. This is a lighthearted thing, right? But I'm treating it as if it is, because I think it is symbolic of what people are doing in a spirit of reverence. Yeah, I do believe it's destructive. Yeah, sweetie, but isn't it also destructive? He is in a position of, he would not need, if the world was full of tiny little Jonathan Pageau, then that would be fine. We would not need to do any of this, and none of it would be happening. It's happening because it needs to happen. People just don't get up and be like, we need to make a mockery of sacred things, just even though it's great for us and there's no need. Like, it's so frustrating for me to see someone who is not harmed by the tradition say, oh, they are destroying the tradition, how dare they? Well, the tradition has been destroying them. Yes, queering Christianity in order to bring it into a new vision of reality. Yes. Yep. Christianity is, in some ways, a kind of bringing in of multiplicity into one. Merci. There is an aspect of the scandal in communion about eating the body of God. Merci. Yeah. Okay. It's just so funny to me that he's getting so uptight about different kinds of people that don't look like him and don't live like him being included. And he's immediately saying, oh, that's not the same kind of inclusion as including, let's say, women and children, or including, I don't know, poor people or something. That's different. As soon as you bring in something that's new, something that doesn't look like me, oh, it's bad type of inclusion now. It's not the real kind of bringing multiplicity into one that Christianity does. It's not the real good kind of scandal in communion that Christianity has. This is the energy of a little, it's like a little baby. I'm sorry, I can't take it seriously. I will say the one thing that I will try to maybe look up or see is, he said that there was an underage, and no one's even talking about this online, and those things usually become a big scandal, so maybe hopefully someone will. Anyway, there was a child, maybe participating in this, and that is one thing where we would all draw a line, right? Obviously, because pedophilia is only on the surface the same as queerness, because it's an unusual thing that doesn't fit, but actually what is going on there is completely different. Only on the surface is it different, and indeed, I think that more pedophiles have been being exposed lately. So yeah, they not like us. But yeah, so because actually what that is a non-consensual relation where one person's overpowering another, whereas queer relationship is consensual. So that's the big difference. Doesn't matter if to you it looks the same, because oh, it's unusual and it's breaking out of the mold. That's a different thing that's going on. Consensual loving relationship versus predation is way more different than one type of consensual relationship versus another. The spirit is different. Anyway, so that is one thing where I'm like, okay, let's not lump that in, first of all, and also what is going on there I would like to know, etc. But yeah. And he's talking both about celebrating differences and removing differences. But wait, never mind, I'm not gonna, because he's saying removing differences. I thought that the idea of inclusion was celebrating, so, because what removes differences is pretending that everyone does fit into this one picture of a bunch of white guys around a table. Not to say that's all the Last Supper is, okay? I'm making a pastiche of it, whatever. It is a meaningful image, there is a reason why, and in the culture back then, I wouldn't go call them a bunch of misogynists in the same modern terms, it was different, whatever. But in the fact is that in the modern day, we could play with that a little bit, and it's you can see that it is meaningful for other people to be considered and included. And I think that all these arguments, these pedantic arguments, do not stand up against people's lives who are being able to live their lives and live and be fulfilled. It doesn't argue. It doesn't stand up to me. It doesn't even make a dent. And what he's saying is, I agree, that it clearly seems like it was sexual, orgiastic, etc. Yeah, they're French. What do you expect? This is the French. And also, people in Europe are less prudish than people in America about nudity and sexuality. That's different culturally. So yeah. But also I think that it's a good thing to bring the scandal back to images. And again, I'm treating this now as if it's a serious commentary on religion, even though it's not, but it could work as one. This is what I'm saying, or this is what I see. I think that it could work as one because, or he's treating it seriously too, so am I gonna do that? Anyway, because communion originally was a scandal. It is a scandal. And people were scandalized by it, and that is an inherent part of it, is that it is meant to be this movement of eroticism in the Georges Bataille sense, and in the sense of it is scandalous, and it does break down and reform the boundaries of our human experience and stuff. And so, but it's become very dry, it's become very, yes, the bread, the wine, whatever. And so bringing back this kind of, scandal to it, I think is always good. Again, going back to, wasn't that what Jesus was kind of about originally? And why is he sounding so, it's just very weird. It's a different spirit that I see in what he's putting forth versus what Jesus was putting forth. Yeah, because Jesus was scandalizing people, and now he is the one being scandalized. Yeah, because I say, oh, yes, it's good to put that back, because that's where it came from, right? And that's what it came from, was a continuation of all these images of sacrifice and consumption and eroticism and one's identity being transformed and everything. And it's good to kind of break that open sometimes and see what is beneath that and draw it out, because it gives you a more fuller sense of the full meaning of communion. If it's just this very dry thing where you just eat, you are missing it. Also, Christians did used to be baptized naked. I don't know. Obviously, it also had people were also less prudish about nudity in the ancient world too. To be honest, I understand what he's saying about the flat world, how their difference is a real thing. And for instance, I've been talking to a friend of mine who, our theology is a little bit different, and when she says my theology is like this, she doesn't mean that's the correct one. And it's confusing to me because I'm used to people saying that, like Monsieur here, saying that to mean that's the correct one, and I always get confused, and then she has to clarify, no, both are fine. She said something about pregnancy being a way to experience the full spread of the body as it used to be, and I was like, well, there are the people who don't want to be pregnant, and they consider that horror. And she's like, no, I'm not saying people need to get pregnant in order to experience this thing. You can be a body in a lot of different ways, and all of them are equally valid, but you don't have to go for the full thing, whatever. And I was like, oh, right. Because if Jonathan Pageau were to say that, he would use that as a reason why all women should get pregnant or something. And I'm just so unusual to see that without the prescriptivism. But anyway, as far as letting go of our differences, yeah, so that's why I say, it's true, on the general principle that there are differences and we have to have differences. From what I see it, the thing that's more asking for people to give up their differences and be one in this soup, or just in this factory line type of thing, is the Christian hegemony, the moralistic right. I'm trying to choose the least offensive term for it, but maybe conservative moralism, Western moralism, I don't know. That thing that is saying you have to be this conform, you have to give up your differences, as in your differences in your gender expression, your differences in your religious expression, your differences in the way you dress, in the way you talk, and everything, and you have to be all together in this little sardine tin, Like, that to me is a much closer representation of this kind of flat ontology or this false unity than the queering of Christianity. You could argue that both of them do participate in it, because no human thing is perfect, nor everything has a little bit of mixedness in it. But I think when I look at a church full of people, they're all cut off their differences in order to assimilate into that, versus this thing where there's a space for people to be different. I'm like, well, one of those is more of a cut off your differences and be one in a false unity than the other. I mean, who do we see cutting off their differences to fit into a false unity where it's only pretending to be unified, but there's no true unity? I immediately think of anyone who is trying to conform, especially to religion, but just to conform in any group, and like he's saying all these things about how Christianity and communion and the tradition holds society together. And I'm like, yeah, bro, maybe your society. There are a lot of people and people groups. Their society is not held together by this. They are suffering from this. You can't say that it holds society together when people are being broken apart too by it. I mean, of course, there's no perfect system, right? But we can make it better. And that's what they're trying to do. Like, what he's saying is, again, how communion brings together all of these elements into a reasonable communion. And that is also what I see overall in the movements, in the good, parts, the ones that I am trying to be a part of the movements of modernity or whatever, is to take all these different threads and bring them together into a unity that's founded on principles and symbols and principles such as, like, I don't know, for instance, consensuality would be one of those, where you don't want to put pedophilia or bestiality in with the other stuff. And like bodily autonomy and everything like that. One of those, there's still some, it's not just complete chaos. But I do agree with what he says about, like, extreme order, like bureaucracy and surveillance, being contrasted with extreme chaos. Like, those are definitely in a fight, and those are very two extremes, and that's what we live in, and that's the context in which this stuff is happening. So, it's not in a vacuum, and it's not perfect, and there is some level of, like, reactionariness. I don't know, a lot of things are reactionary, most things are in some way, and maybe, you don't want to be that way as much as possible, but it's part of the world, and we are kind of, there is this pendulum and stuff, and that's just, but I see that. And then also he says about the revolutionary imagery, and this is something that also I know that, Christians will have their apocalyptic kind of vision, and then the left has its revolution where we burn everything down. But as I have heard pointed out in the circles of the left, even on Tumblr, no, drop the revolution and back away slowly. If we were to burn everything to the ground like that, then people would suffer, and the most vulnerable people who are already suffering would suffer more. So that's not what we want to do, or that's not what you should want to do, is not to burn everything down, but to continue to make as much strides as possible with as least harm as possible. And to be perfectly honest, the majority of the Christian right being offended and hurt, it's not a great harm to me. I think that's a little bit of a lesser harm than police brutality, women being forced to give birth, queer people not being able to express themselves, being bullied, being killed, etc. On a whole, that weighs a little more heavily on my mind than upper middle class Christian, you know what I mean, then I don't want to say, then some people getting their feelings hurt is what I mean. And I also think maybe we wouldn't need to panic so much about kind of maybe society is going through, because he says like, okay, we're bringing the nations together and celebrating excellence in humans, and everything about the celebration is ironic, mocking, and degenerate. First of all, they're French. Probably they're just doing this because they're French. No, but then also for me, when I think of that, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe, but also there is joy in it. There is some sort of communal something in it. Orgies are very communal. Everyone is together. No, and it's kind of like a rebellious teenager. You're like, okay, you can do that. This is a moment that we're having right now. If you were not so panicked about other things, and if you were not so maybe blind to, I would say, looking at the surface and blind to the spirit of things for people who are like this. And Jonathan Pageau is not as like conspiracy theory, panic, fearmongery as some others, of course, but he does kind of still fall into that. I mean, he really does, unfortunately, even though he's the person that I learned a lot of these principles of symbolism from, which is very sad. But yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, if, like, this wouldn't be such a big problem if some other things were adjusted. If, like, he had a different view of, I don't know, society overall and, like, different values, and, like, he's really panicking about it maybe more than... See, because, again, like, queering and turning things upside down, making fun of them and mocking them. People, okay, if you have, and again, I'm not talking about specifically, this was more lighthearted, but there's also things that are sincere that people will call a mockery. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the sincere basket, just like they're putting the other stuff in the mockery basket, I guess, because we're seeming to be talking about both. So, again, he says, not being sincere, being dismissive, queering and turning things upside down, making fun of them, and mocking them. And I say, well, yeah, so a person who is queering Christianity, the way that I have seen that, those who are claiming to do that, and those who live their lives for doing that, what they're doing is not dismissing, making a mockery. They are opening it up, and they are trying to find their place in this without cutting off the part of themselves that God has given them and created them, that are, like, authentic. Like, he is not able to see that. Like, I don't know, I just think of the way that he would see so many things as a mockery that are not a mockery, that is not in a spirit of mockery. And I think you have to start there when evaluating something like this that kind of is in more of that spirit of, of maybe parody. But what about, I'm sure that he would have many similar things to say about, say, that painting of Jesus with the scars, when that was made in a spirit of devotion, and that's what the term queering specifically for me, I've only heard that in the sense of people who are queer, who are trying to find or to make a place for more of the human, more parts of humanity, just like Jesus originally was doing. It's not being dismissive. You are being dismissive of whole swaths of humanity. Like, it's not inherently being to queer something and to, like, include greater parts of humanity in something is not inherently to be dismissive. It could be, but it also could not be. And when he says, inversion and mocking is empty and it will run out, the true seed of things that are true, good, and beautiful will win in the end, I just think of all of the forms of bigotry that have been empty and run out in the past. And the two main ones that I can think of being, of course, the racism, especially in America, with black people, and then against women, of misogyny and not being allowed to be a full person, but merely being considered property. Those two things have been empty, have run out. People have used this same rhetoric to attack those things, but it was empty, it ran out, and now we have the true seed of the true and the beautiful, and we have a wider and a higher communion. I like that he says to focus on the good here and not to panic. I agree. And we have to focus on the good and the positive. And yeah. Cross yourself and then put your hands up. Yeah, okay. I can get behind that. I think in the end, I don't really have a coherent thing. This is just me like reading through it because I was told to read through it and I don't have anything else to do, and reacting to it. I hope that in 10 years I'll be able to say what I'm thinking with more clarity. I do. But yeah, maybe in 10 years I also won't, hopefully I won't care about this. Hopefully I will have a family and I will have my own life and I won't have to do this anymore to fill my day, because I could be doing more meaningful things, I think. But yeah, in the end, I think of the way that Jesus, in his context, did a lot of things, and he would say, does this offend you? And it did offend a bunch of people, and they left. And they were like, you are making a mockery of holy things. Literally, they said that to him all the time. And so, I guess that is just what I would want to ask to JP and the group of people who are up in arms about this. Does this offend you? That's okay, I guess. Yeah.